Let me turn to Reva Goujon. She's Vice President of Global Analysis at Stratfor, a geopolitical strategy firm. She joins me from Austin, Texas. Reva, welcome.
Thank you.
Before I get to the controversy and the political fallout from Brexit, I'd like to ask you a couple of questions about Turkey. This is what we know right now. At least 10 people dead, 60 plus others wounded. It happened at Ataturk Airport in the heart of Istanbul, one of the busiest airports in the region. Can you perhaps explain to our viewers, Turkey is basically fighting a battle on two fronts. On one side, PKK, on the other side, ISIL, which makes it vulnerable to these types of attacks.
Absolutely. Turkey has multiple strands of terrorism to deal with. In this particular attack on the Istanbul airport, this is looking like a target set that would be reflective of Islamic State. If you remember, we also had major IS bombings in Sultanahmet, which is a major historic tourist area of Istanbul. We also had a recent suicide bombing on Istiklal Street in Istanbul, again, another major tourist-frequented area. We had another IS bombing in Ankara at the central railway station there. So always big crowds, typically tourist targets, which is really hitting Turkey's tourism industry very, very badly. Whereas on the Kurdish side, you have attacks, major suicide attacks have taken place in metropolitan areas like Ankara, but they tend to go more for government and military targets. So I do think this is very IS linked.
But what do you make of the fact that so far there's been no claim of responsibility?
Oh, well, that's natural. I mean, it takes some time before you do see a claim of responsibility. The attack just happened. Sometimes, they like to leave a bit of ambiguity. But in the Turkish case, we have seen claims in the past.
All right, let me switch gears here and talk about what is next for Britain, what is next for the European Union. In the aftermath of this Brexit vote, the British government still needs to invoke Article 50 to make this exit official. That has not happened yet. Why is that?
Well, Cameron doesn't want to do it, right? Why should he have to take responsibility for the Brexit when he can hand it off to his successor? And so that was his choice. He decided to do that. So now if he will formally resign in October, that gives us now a few months. And really, he needs to give time to the ruling Conservative Party to figure out who that successor is going to be. And as you can see already, the state of UK politics is in total chaos. And so there's a lot of competition taking place on both the Labour side and within the Conservative Party, and a lot to be figured out on who is going to be the one to lead the campaign and on what terms, right? So are we going to see candidates pushing more toward, we'll find a way out of this one way or another, those on the Remain side? Or will even those on the Remain side say, look, you can look to me to at least negotiate this responsibly and effectively. I can develop a plan that you can trust in. Either way, it's still a lot of steps to go before we see that trigger.
Certainly, there's the internal politics of Britain, but this vote has also left the European Union shaken to the core. How concerned are you that other EU members could perhaps follow Britain's example here?
I mean, this was always going to be the risk. And remember, the EU fragmentation trend runs much, much longer than just this Brexit saga. And so you have countries all over who have been advocating using referendums, right, the ultimate democratic tool of expression, to capture the will of their populations when you have a lot of people who are very upset about the economic conditions in their country, about the migrant issue, about social benefits, a whole host of issues. So France has elections next year. Marine Le Pen's National Front movement has said, well, we want a referendum as well. In the Netherlands, there's a lot of talk about referendums. You see the Five Star Movement in Italy raising the idea of a referendum. So this will become a very popular tool across the continent. And if you look at it, I mean, this is really Germany's worst nightmare. They knew that this Brexit vote was going to unleash a whole new set of proposals coming from every side of the continent. That's already underway, and everybody's effectively going to be negotiating their own terms. Even if it's staying within the European Union, it's on very different terms altogether, and the trend is toward taking their rights back from Brussels.
So, Reva, how do you restore some sense of unity, both within Britain and throughout Europe after this colossal decision?
Well, you don't, right? I think that's why Merkel is going to come under incredible pressure and her coalition. Really, remember, the heart of the European Union is the Franco-German partnership. And when that comes under strain, that's when you should be really worried. And I think that's where we're headed. And so as this core of Europe is trying to keep the continent together, look at what it's already getting. In the wake of the Brexit, you have the French saying, okay, solidarity, sure, but now's the time for more social spending, not what the Germans want to hear. You have the Italians saying we need to ease regulations on having state aid to banks, not what the Germans want to hear. The Poles, meanwhile, are saying, look, we're coming up with a whole new EU treaty. It's going to be great, and it's all going to be about repatriating our rights away from Brussels, back to the nation states. So north, south, east, west, that fragmentation is taking place. And so the Germans, the core Europeans, they'll try to focus on other types of integration, for example, on security, anti-terrorism, external border security, things like that, where more or less the members can agree. But when it comes to those real big issues of national sovereignty, how countries should be managing their budgets, the migrant issue and setting limits on that, that's where we really cannot expect deeper integration. You can forget about a banking union as well.
All right, we'll leave it at that. Reva Goujon, thank you so much.